I'm Justin Gaba, and today we're tackling a topic that resonates with many of us, imposter syndrome. I'm joined with two of my talented coworkers from Worthwhile. They're here to share their insights and personal experiences. First up, we have Amy. Amy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I started with Worthwhile in June of this year. So I've been here for about 6 months. So I'm just starting out. I got my degree in software engineering in December, so about a year ago. And this is my first real developer job. So I had a QA job for a few months right after I graduated, and then switched over to Worthwhile in June. So I do full stack engineering. So that's everything from the database to the UI and kind of everything in between. So it's a very wide job description, but I enjoy like knowing how things work. So it works really well for me.
It's great to have you here. Next, we have Stephanie. Stephanie, we'd love to hear a little bit about your background and your role at the company.
Yeah, so I have been in the tech industry for almost 3 years now. I was a career changer back in 2020. Prior to that, I owned my own small business for about 10 to 12 years in a completely different industry. So this is my second company as a developer, and I started out as a front-end engineer and then moved into a dev team lead role, which was a half engineer, half management role. And then more recently moved into an innovation and engineering lead role, working with our CEO, Dan, to head up our venture studio division.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Stephanie. So imposter syndrome is the feeling of self-doubt that many software developers experience despite possessing excellent skills and several years of experience. So can each of you share your personal experiences with imposter syndrome? Amy, let's start with you.
Sure. So funny story. As I heard about this episode of the podcast about imposter syndrome, I messaged April to ask if I could be a part of the episode because I wanted to share my experiences, my thoughts on it, what I've had to work through personally. So I typed out the message and I sat there for a minute and thought, am I like, what am I doing? Am I good enough to be on this podcast? I just started at this company a few months ago. I just started in my career in software. I don't know a lot yet. Maybe I'm not good enough to be on the podcast. Maybe I'm not professional. Maybe I don't have a good presentation, that I can't do it. And then I stopped and I realized that it's the irony of thinking I'm an imposter about being on a podcast to talk about imposter syndrome. So I sent the message and then I sat back and I waited. And April's response was that imposter syndrome is such a universal human experience and I qualify because I'm a human. I mean, that's a paraphrase. That's the idea of it. So that's the most recent funny story that I've got for it.
Yeah, it's very meta, feeling imposter syndrome about being on a podcast about imposter syndrome. So that's interesting. Very ironic. Yeah. Well, what about you, Stephanie?
Yeah, I mean, I deal with imposter syndrome still. I've dealt with it in my former industry. I distinctly remember probably the first 2 to 3 years in that industry feeling like I didn't know what I was doing and winging it all the time. And definitely felt it as a career changer in the tech industry. Felt it this morning. So definitely, it's something that is there and present, even, a couple of years in now. I've just learned to deal with it differently, but definitely experience it on a frequent basis.
Do you think women face any particular challenges around imposter syndrome?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think being, tech industry is just predominantly male. So as a female coming in, you already feel different. So you add that on top of what you're already feeling with imposter syndrome, and it just adds to it. I think there's a lot of feelings of, maybe you don't know as much, or you got to prove yourself more. And it's kind of silly if you think about it, that your gender or how, that would make you less than, like, it's just silly, but you feel it for sure.
I think, yeah, definitely being in the minority, you notice. So walking into a meeting or sitting down with a bunch of developers and there are either all guys or almost all guys, and realizing, okay, I'm different. Does that mean that I'm not good enough? Having that aspect. And I think the other aspect is the aspect of comparison. I feel like that might be a little bit more of an issue for women, is comparing themselves either to each other or to other people or to what they want to be, and having that comparison mindset when you're talking to other developers who just even specialize in different things, even if they're at the same technical level as you, but they're specializing in something different. You have that, at least I have that feeling of they know something that I don't, which means I'm missing something, which means I'm not good enough.
I would add too, Amy, I don't know if you feel this way, but like you already feel a little bit different as a woman because lots of women wouldn't sign up to be a software engineer anyway. Like it's not a very common thing in and of itself. And so you almost feel different as a woman compared to other women. And then you walk into a situation where like, oh, now I'm like this different kind of woman now surrounded by a bunch of guys. You just feel different. It's like compounded difference. I don't know how to explain that, but that I feel that anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, I've had people ask me, I'm getting to know somebody, and they ask, what do you do? And I say, I'm a software engineer. And like 9 times out of 10, the first thing they say after that is, oh, I could never do that.
Yes.
And then I'm like, well, maybe I can't either, but here I am. And having that, like, it is different. I haven't met a lot of other female developers. I met a few, and I'm very grateful for them, but having that difference as well of not only am I a minority in this group of developers, I'm also a minority in this group of just, women choosing different careers.
How do you think men can support women with their feelings of imposter syndrome?
I think that's a great question because I don't think probably a lot of men understand or even acknowledge that, what we were just talking about. So simply just being aware is huge, and making sure that your demeanor as, as you speak to a female engineer is respectful, and like just being mindful. I think that in itself is huge.
There's that aspect of realizing that everybody has earned the position that they have now. So if that's a position of like a dev lead or just a software engineer, is they worked hard regardless of who they are. They worked hard to be in that position, and acknowledging that is huge. But from leadership coming in as I'm here to support you, ask me questions, is also big. And I think we'll probably talk about this later, is on how to handle imposter syndrome. A lot of it is asking questions. So being the person who is willing to hear those questions and willing to give that wasn't a dumb question. Here's an answer. Here's why we do it this way. Here's what you can do to solve that problem. And coming at it with everybody starts at the bottom mindset, I think is super helpful.
Listening to the podcast, we'll have a better perspective now, right?
Yeah, I hope so. And I think, Amy touched on something too. It's like, I think management and the leadership at a company really needs to also foster that and be mindful of that, because, the effects of if you're not that way, if you're not respectful or you're not mindful of it, it can be pretty, it can be pretty toxic if you're not. And so even for managers to ask, how are you doing? Are you struggling with this? How can we help with that? That I think is huge.
And even the just saying, hey, you're doing a good job. Like I've had my manager say that to me a couple of times, and that's something that I go back to when I'm really struggling with, am I even supposed to be here? Am I any good at this? Is realizing, okay, my manager told me that I'm doing a good job. So I'm going to take that, and I'm going to trust that, the type of person that he is, he's not just going to lie to my face and say, you're doing great. Because that's not who he is. That's not what a manager should do. So taking that, hearing that I am doing a good job, and then believing it. So for managers, just telling your employees that they're doing a good job, it might seem very simple. You might say, oh, they know they're doing a good job because they are doing a good job. But hearing that from somebody, even if it's a coworker or a manager, hearing that from somebody is huge.
It's interesting. They say managers think that they say enough praise, but a lot of them actually fall short of enough praise by, I think the statistics is like 50 to 70%. So I think that, yeah, if you're a manager out there, it's important, especially for someone who's new to the industry, who has shared with you they struggle with imposter syndrome, make sure that you lay it on heavy, because it's probably not heavy. But to you, it might feel that way as a manager, but to the person receiving it, it's what they need.
I think a lot of managers are listening and hopefully they're hearing this. So I think it's good advice. What are some strategies that have helped you cope with or overcome feelings of imposter syndrome?
I think what has helped me the most is being willing to ask those questions. And I think the first step for me personally is getting over myself, realizing I just started out. It's okay that I don't know everything. Let me ask somebody to figure this out so I know it next time. I think that's a big factor. The other thing that's helped is looking back, and instead of comparing yourself to another developer that's been there longer or somebody who started at the same time as you, comparing yourself to where you were 6 months ago, where you were 3 months ago, where you were last week, and just seeing that progress that you've made and comparing yourself to where you were instead of comparing yourself to where you want to be is super helpful.
I think for me, I need to process verbally. So finding a safe person that I can share my insecurities with. I actually found a mentor that has really changed my life. She is an engineer as well, and she gave me just really great perspective. I think it's important to have that person. But I would say here at Worthwhile, we have a culture of that. So it makes it very easy to be vulnerable, and the team around you responds well to that. And so, I mean, I remember being new here and not understanding something, and I would Slack Justin, and he would always come with a very helpful attitude. It wasn't condemning, it wasn't judging, it wasn't making me feel dumb. So I'd say, wherever you're at, making sure that the culture is healthy is important. And even if maybe the culture is not the healthiest, finding a few trusted engineers on the team where you can be there for each other is really, really big deal.
Have a supporting culture is important.
I think something that is also helpful is just talking about imposter syndrome. I know when I started, a couple weeks after I started, I was in a Zoom call with Stephanie, and the subject came up, and she said, "Hey, this is something that I still deal with, even though I've been in this industry for a few more years than you have. And this is something that I've talked to other people who have even more experience than me, and they still deal with it." So knowing that you're not alone in it, knowing that it's a pretty universal experience. I'm sure it's not 100% universal. I'm sure there's those couple people out there that have just never dealt with this in their life, and good for them. Um, but knowing that it's a universal experience and that almost everybody at some point deals with it is also good.
Yeah, I remember even being in boot camp and everybody was so scared to ask questions because they would come off dumb. And then you realize that everyone's got a dumb question and it was completely okay. And someone's dumb question was actually someone else's dumb question that was in their mind. And so, like, I think when we got here, or when I got here, being able to air out like, oh, I don't know that. Someone else would be like, oh yeah, I don't know that either. And when you lead with vulnerability rather than strength, like it all, it actually is way more productive and effective. Because I think I've definitely been in situations where you're around someone that comes off like I know everything, and it really just hinders communication at that point. Nobody wants to be around that person.
Yeah. I think it's important definitely to be vulnerable and it's important to be okay with not knowing something. And I think that'll get you far. Like it's okay to ask a lot of stupid questions, right? I think for me, I rely on asking stupid questions in order to learn. Like I'm okay with being the stupidest person in the room because I know that if I ask those questions, I'm going to learn something. So
I think asking a stupid question to go off of a smart answer or an intelligent answer is so much better, so much wiser than not asking that stupid question, not asking that dumb question, and then going off of a dumb assumption. And then that'll get you into even more trouble further down the path. So ask the
exactly,
dumb question, get a good answer, and then go off of that,
right? Because then you're not going to assume anymore, right?
hopefully.
Hopefully. What's your advice to people experiencing these feelings in the industry that are just starting their careers? Stephanie, you want to start?
Yeah, so I would love to speak to those who are similar to me. You're a career changer and maybe older to the industry, went through boot camp, non-traditional student, you name it. I remember graduating from boot camp, talking to my career counselor and saying, who's going to hire me? There's all these other people that are better than me, and I'm not even going to pass my tech interview. And she was like, Steph, don't worry, you're gonna get a job, don't worry. And I was like, how do you know? And I guess she had seen in me, some social skills and my experience in my former business. And she said, don't worry, you'll see. I was like, okay. So I graduated boot camp, and my first job into tech was actually with an amazing team who valued culture fit more than anything. And so did my first interview with them, didn't even do much of a tech interview, and they offered me the job. And I just could not believe it. And so for them to value, yes, I could, I had the tech skills, but for them to value the other things that I brought to the table was huge because I thought those didn't mean anything. So if you're a career changer, be proud of those experiences that you bring to the table. Be proud of, your maturity, even that you've gone through something different and now you've career change. It's a really hard thing. So don't let those voices of doubt creep in and keep you from chasing your dream into the tech industry.
It's inspiring.
My advice would be for people who went the route that I did or similar to it. I went to college, and I mean, it was not a straight path from college to degree. I went to college, transferred out of that college, took a gap year, transferred into another college, and then got my degree in December. Biggest piece of advice that I have is being able to reframe your strengths and recognize what your strengths are. Because when I was thinking about imposter syndrome, one of the things that I thought was, oh, I don't actually know the answer to this problem. I just Googled it and I found the answer that way. And I think that's the same for a lot of developers, a lot of people in the tech industry, but especially a lot of people who are just graduating college, a lot of people from just like Gen Z, that generation, is their technical skills of being able to Google something and find it can kind of have that feeling of, oh, I didn't actually know it, I just found the answer. But when you really realize like what all is involved in that, you were able to you have a problem that you're working on. You looked for the information, you found correct information that was relevant to your problem, and then you were able to apply it in a way to solve that problem. That's huge. That is a massive strength. And that is something that will help you for the rest of your career, is being able to find information and apply it to a problem is more than I just Googled it. It's research skills. It's the ability to learn and adapt, and being able to rephrase that what you think is like just a given into, okay, this really is a strength. This is something that I can do. This is something that I can do well, having had a computer in my house for most of my life, experiencing just the technology at a different age. than a lot of people, or just different technology at a different age, is having those skills, having that experience and a different perspective than a lot of other people.
All right, that's a wrap for today. Big thanks to Amy and Stephanie for diving into the world of imposter syndrome with us. And hey, to everyone listening, you're not alone in this. Keep rocking it out there. Don't be too hard on yourself. Catch you on the next one. Stay awesome, everyone. All right.